Episode 27 of the podcast. In the first part, we're going to talk about how trainers are kind of being thrown under the bus because we want dogs to be well trained, but we haven't given trainers a whole lot of information about what we need. And in the second part, we're going to talk about the American Kennel Club's Canine Good Citizen Test and how it directly relates to grooming in veterinary settings. This is the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, and a certified professional dog trainer. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. So here we are on episode 27. Holy cow. So what that means is that I have done now 6 months worth of weekly podcasts, which has really been, life-changing. That's kind of cool, right? Like every week for 6 months, I'm trying to come up with content for you, for my listeners, and things that will inspire all of us to try to learn more about this topic. But yeah, 6 months, that's kind of cool. So. And I haven't broke into a thick New England accent in all that time, so woohoo! But today I want to talk about trainers, whether you realize it or not, we're kind of getting thrown under the bus. And so I want you to be thinking that vets and groomers want dogs to behave well in veterinary and grooming settings, but there's just precious little information for us as trainers to work from. So we're trying to teach a skill. And then that we think is going to be useful for groomers or vets, and then they don't like it, or they never use it, or they just complain that it was too much to do, or too little influence over the dog, whatever. So there are a few courses out there for trainers to work on grooming, vet, and husbandry skills. Like there's the Fear-Free training certifications. There's Dr. Sophia Yin's information. There are some out there. I believe Fenzi Sports has one for animal husbandry stuff. But I got to say, I'm coming from a different point of view. And yeah, everybody looks shocked that Chrissy's coming from a different point of view, right? But I'm coming from a different point of view that many of those courses, as somebody who takes like every course that comes up, I'm like, woohoo! I want to take a course. Many of those courses aren't setting dogs up well for a grooming experience because, or even some of them for the vet experience. And I want you to think about the fact that as trainers, and groomers, you might not realize this, but as trainers, we are so meticulous. And I can't tell you how many different seminars are out there for something like heel work. Right? And how many different approaches there are to teaching a dog to heel, whether it be from like puppy level to the higher obedience levels. But we go to classes for the same thing, the same topic, in a variety of outlooks. And I want you to start thinking about dog grooming and vet visits sort of like a dog sport. And I know that's a weird way to think of it, but think about it as a dog sport, because then it's easier for us to say, okay, well, what is the ultimate goal of this dog sport, right? Like, what does the end look like that we're training for? Because if we were training for competition obedience, we would be looking in our own minds as to, okay, eventually they won't be allowed to have food in the ring during heel work, or won't be able to have toys in the ring during heel work, right? Like we start thinking about that very early on in our base training, that, okay, how can I use those tools if that's what is needed, and also have an awareness of those tools will be faded out later. And I use that as an example right now because in a grooming setting, as I've said before, food isn't necessarily something that is able to be used. So also trainers, I want you to think right now, imagine that you're working with dogs who are food aggressive, and would you want your customer working on another dog with a lot of food in front of your food aggressive dog? Just ponder that for a minute, right? Like that's a higher level, right? That's not a beginner level skill set. That dog would need to be prepped for that. What kind of things would you expect that food aggressive dog to do if now a second person comes over, puts him on leash and goes to walk him across the room, right? Do you see where chaos might erupt? And that's why in a setting like a grooming setting where the dogs are in the same room, they're in view of each other most of the time. I mean, unless we put like a sheet over the front or have positioned crates in such a way that some dogs aren't in full view of other dogs. which can be really tricky because keep in mind in a grooming situation, we need to be able to monitor all of the dogs in our care. So we need to be able to see those dogs. We need to be able to see their faces and make sure that they're not panting, make sure that they're not uncomfortable. So to have animals in the same room, imagine what you would tell a customer with the dog who is food aggressive, right? Like, I don't want him in that environment. So there are a lot of dogs in the general population who are food aggressive. There are a lot of them. Just take my word for it. I've seen so many in grooming settings that, like, if suddenly food drops, they're like, whoa. But some of the things that might happen, again, imagine somebody came to you and said, my dog is food aggressive, right? Now they're on a grooming table that smells like food. What might happen, right? We have to think about that as a wild card. So that's one of the things that we have to think about if grooming were a dog sport. One of the things we'd have to think about is that ultimately we would need to be very, very mindful of food use for teaching these behaviors early, knowing that they are not practical in what we would call our show ring, right? Like, we have ring savvy dogs. I would like grooming room savvy dogs. And when we think about it as a dog sport, right? Grooming room savvy dogs. Like, what is the cue that grooming is going to happen? Well, for my dogs, okay, let's say we go into a grooming room and they're like, oh, we're going to be grooming. Interesting. But I'm also seeing my groomer friends. And they actually board with our friends who, so if we're going there, it's often to drop them off for boarding. So it's a little bit different. But when my guys see fly ball practice, they're in, fly ball practice. Or our fly ball club people, they're like, oh my God, those are our fly ball friends. That must be what we're doing now. When they see rally obedience, they understand, like, oh, cool, there's gates and there are those little cones and those little signs. We know what we're doing, right? I want dogs to think I am in the grooming setting. Oh, cool. I know exactly what we're going to be doing. And to have a different criteria for our dog grooming sport. So if we think about it as a sport, I think that then we start thinking a little bit more like, oh, right. So if you're an agility person, like, I think that I know I'm not an agility person. I know there are multiple ways to teach contact zones, right? And they're all different. And that doesn't mean any of them are right or any of them are wrong. Just that we take more time to explore what is right for that individual dog. Because as I've said before, and I know trainers know this, but groomers and owners and vets, but the study of animal behavior is the study of one. What does this dog need in this moment? What are we observing with this animal? So sometimes I find these courses for teaching husbandry behaviors rely heavily on just a couple of tricks. And I know that's not right to call them tricks, but a couple of very short-sighted skills. Things like chin targeting, nose targeting, the on and the start button behaviors, which are, so for groomers, chin targeting is when a dog places their chin either on a hand or on a leg or on an object to hold still. Like, it's their way of choosing to say, I am choosing to stay still for you. Nose targeting is pressing their nose against something as I am choosing to stay still for this. So when you think about, like, targeting, it's not real handy for grooming. And let me tell you why. Because targeting is exhausting, right? If you asked a dog to nose target for half an hour, as trainers, that's an extremely difficult thing for them to do. So in a grooming setting, if you have taught a dog to nose target to indicate that I am ready and I'm willing, then when they aren't willing, or if that's their go ahead button, when they pull their nose away, they're expecting us to stop. And that's not realistic in the grooming setting, right? What we as groomers, I'm going to say we as groomers, but what I think we as groomers mostly would want is a dog who is calm, comfortable, and cooperative. And I know I say that a lot. So what exactly does that look like? I'm going to tell you, if you have a dog who is calm, comfortable, and cooperative, and they're standing on the table and you're able to just focus on the hair, lift up legs, move them around, reposition them. I've talked before about the posable action figure. You might want to go back and find that episode. But reposition them and move them around. In times when they can sit, I'll let them sit. Like, it's not that rigid. And if they are well trained for grooming settings, it's about as interesting as watching paint dry. So I think sometimes as trainers in some of these courses are telling you to have something that's super obvious, as in, I am willing to let you do this. But the dog that looks about as interesting as watching paint dry is telling you, I am willing to do this, right? It doesn't need to be something huge. It doesn't need to be a huge signal. And actually what we want is a dog who's pretty loose. We've talked about like feeling to see if they're loose or stiff. I want that dog to be loose because the endurance run that is grooming is very different, and they need to be able to be calm through it. And most dogs are interested in what's going on and then kind of check out. And you know what? I like that. I want them to be able to just kind of stare off into space like, this is an interesting point of view. I'm never usually up this high. And I know I'm anthropomorphizing, obviously, but they do. They kind of check out and they just start looking at all their surroundings and gazing at things. But that soft gaze and that soft body language is the ultimate goal. So things that we're looking for are part of that goal. Now, to circle back to vet behaviors, I want you to think about like nose targeting and chin targeting can be super useful for short things, right? And some specific short things. Just like in the grooming setting. Yeah, you want to do nose targeting and the groomer understands what you've been working on and is willing to implement it for the nail trim, but maybe not the entire grooming. But so for instance, range of motion. When a vet needs to check a dog's range of motion and that front end shoulder motion, having a nose target or a chin target interferes with that fluid movement. And I think most vets, if a dog has issues, they're like, score, this is wonderful. This is so much more than we could do before with him. And this is an improvement. But for us to keep in mind, the goal of our veterinary sport is a dog who's going to say, just kind of be there and be repositioned. And I'll tell you, one of my guys, when we have to, I know he has occasionally needs his shoulder massaged out. And if he were trying to nose target, his whole body would stiffen. Because I do chin targeting and stuff with my dogs. I think it's fun, but it's not something I ask for if I need to check his front end, right? Because it stiffens his body. So just as a study of one, that's my po dog. But if I ask him to put his chin on my hand and then try to check his front end, it's going to show up as more stiff. And he's so focused on doing what he's being asked to do, this action that he has been trained to do, that he's not necessarily showing me on his body language if he's hit like a little bit of a sore point. So if we're thinking about grooming and vet visits as a sport, then we can explore, all right, so we have this one tool, and this is used wonderfully in some areas. And then what other tools can we explore? And I really want trainers and groomers and vets to talk more about this so that we can get better information out there. And I actually get a little bit of pushback sometimes, like, oh yeah, that's a great topic for a podcast. I already do that. I'm like, you know what? I already do it too, but I listen to other people's podcasts and read other people's books and take other people's courses. Yeah, of course. I want you to be inspired to learn more or to find out how you can help people do it your way, right? Maybe you have found the cure. Maybe you have found this awesome way of doing it, and you're just kind of assuming that everybody would know that, but we don't. Right? So let's get together and think about it as a dog sport so that then we can remember, oh, right. Like how many different ways are there to teach a sit? How many different ways are there to teach a sit as a front? Right? And when we think about it as a sport, I think for some of us as trainers, it reminds us, oh, right. So not only is a dog an individual and we're looking at an individual's behavior, but also there are so many different ways to teach various actions to get up to the skill level that we need ultimately. If you're enjoying my podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Since I brought up teaching grooming and vet visits as a sport, I'm actually going to talk about some criteria that are already out there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the American Kennel Club's Canine Good Citizen Test. So I occasionally hear trainers talking about the CGC, the Canine Good Citizen Test, implying that, or outright saying that it's not realistic for many dogs. And many dogs aren't going to be able to do it. And I get that. I agree with that. But that goal should be what we're trying to work toward for every dog. Even if we don't think they're going to be able to achieve it, that's okay. We should be working toward that for every dog and handler pair. Because as a groomer, I got to tell you, every step of the Canine Good Citizen test happens at a grooming shop. As a vet tech, we can sometimes keep dogs out of sight of each other. But grooming, yeah, that's much harder in a grooming shop environment. And actually, at animal hospitals, it often involves some creative work in the waiting room and scheduling. But let's go through the 10 steps or the 10 actions in the Canine Good Citizen test because I want to put it through a groomer filter for you guys. And keeping in mind that while I am very groomer centric on this podcast, if a dog learns to be good for grooming, they also are learning to be good for their vet, but not necessarily the other way around because grooming skills are much harder than most veterinary skills. Veterinary skills have a difficulty level of sometimes it hurts, but they are also much shorter skills. Like the vet doesn't keep a dog's attention for an hour. Very rarely does a vet keep a dog's attention for an hour or two. Whereas grooming, we do. So let's go through the first one, and that's accepting a friendly stranger, allowing a stranger to approach and talk to the owner. Yep, that happens in waiting rooms. It happens in parking lots. You get there with your dog and you get out of the car and someone goes, "Oh, I used to have a dog that looked just like him and I just dropped off my Buffy and what's your dog's name?" Right? I mean, that's normal. We're at a dog place, right? So being able to accept a friendly stranger, allow them to approach and talk to the owner happens all the time. Okay. Number 2, sit politely for petting. Well, that one comes in handy, right? It might not be for everybody, but if they're there and the groomer is taking them in and I just want to check them over a little bit, run a comb through, make sure that we don't have any fleas, right? I used to work someplace where that was our normal intake was, okay, let's just double check that we don't see any flea dirt, checking for mats, running a comb through so that you can tell people, okay, let me show you that this is going to need a lot of brushing or need to come off. So being able to sit politely for that or just be politely able to have somebody handle them and touch them. Number 3 was appearance in grooming, and that's when they're being taught to let somebody check their ears and touch their front feet. Okay, that's pretty obvious exactly who it's for. That's for groomers and vets. So they're like, okay, that's straight up right there for us already, right? Number 4 was out for a walk, just a loose lead. And that's when they're going into or out of a shop. And I want you to be thinking about how that turns into a safety issue because a dog that pulls through into a doorway before an owner gets a chance to look inside the room and see if there's somebody right there at the door, right? This is all normal stuff that these dogs go through and that these owners go through that we need to be helping them with, right? So loose lead should be the default. If a dog's on a leash, loose lead should be the default. I kind of don't even care about heel work for most of my average customers. Because you know what? If you teach them to walk on a loose lead and you need them closer to you, you simply give them less leash. But heeling is kind of a fancy version. Like that's learning how to march in the marching band, right? We don't really need that to walk into a grooming shop or a vet visit. But we do need a dog that is aware of where their owner is. And that's kind of what loose lead walking is. It's like, oh, I have an awareness that I'm supposed to be walking with my dance partner, with my human. So number 5 is walking through a crowd. And that may seem like it's something that dogs don't do. It's one of the ones that people talk about, like, I don't think my dog would ever be able to do that. And the Canine Good Citizen test is so hard. But walking through a crowd is walking through a parking lot or a waiting room. Right? Like you think about that's a normal part of a dog's day. If they're in a grooming shop with more than one groomer, they're walking through a crowd. Right? They're walking through a room with at least other groomer ankles in view. And everybody's moving around doing their own thing, not necessarily just focusing on them. So walking through a crowd is parking lots, waiting rooms, and walking around in the grooming room or in a treatment room at an animal hospital because sometimes there are staff in the treatment room and there's commotion, right? Number 6, sit down and stay. Those are very normal training behaviors, and I think that no one should be skipping those. Those are ways to help a dog understand how to interact with us and learn from us. But in a grooming setting or a setting, that's one of the ways you can get them kind of paying attention in a waiting room. So if you're in a waiting room at the vet's office and it's not your turn to go in yet, yeah, you can work on things like sit and down and stay, right? That's helpful. You see somebody else coming in and you think, oh, there's going to be another pet coming in. How about I have you stay here beside me until we find out if that's a friendly dog or another person or a cat, right? So those are useful in our day-to-day grooming setting and vet settings, right? Number seven. Number seven is coming when called from about 10 feet away. And you might think that doesn't really get used because all these dogs are on leash, but that's one of the ways to get your dog away from other dogs or from other people. Again, waiting rooms, parking lots. So you're in the parking lot and your dog's on the end of the leash or goofing around, sniffing, maybe peeing, right? And you see somebody else coming up, you call your dog, get them back with you, right? That's so normal. And if we had more of that, there'd be less scuffles happening at a grooming shop or vet office because they happen, right? But being called from about 10 feet away on leash, yeah, I think that's a nice goal. I think that that's appropriate to ask for the average dog. Certainly some of these things are going to be harder for dogs that have a big issue, but the average dog, yeah, we should be working toward these. And with a distraction level that you would find in a waiting room or a parking lot of a dog place, right? Number 8, reaction to another dog. Yep, we want them to be able to hold their brain together in the presence of another dog, right? And actually, this is where sometimes people's perceptions of taking puppy class kind of fail their dogs because they never move on. I think trainers, we understand the early socialization of puppy class, but not necessarily owners thinking, oh, wait, and I also have to teach them how to be around adult dogs. Because the dog that wants to charge over and smash into every other dog to say hi is still behaving like a puppy even though they're an adult. So we want dogs to see, oh, there's another dog in the waiting room. And maybe I'm not supposed to play with him. Right? I'm not allowed to play with him until somebody says, go play. Or I don't have to play with him and my owners are going to keep me separated from him. Depends on the dog. One of my dogs does not crave interactions with other dogs. I would easily ask him to kind of like, hey, get behind me and I will take care of it for you. Whereas my other guy would love to go over and say hi. In his case, it's how about you come over here because I don't think you should be interacting with that dog right now. And reactions to other dogs, especially in a vet setting, because you don't know if that other dog is ill. You don't know if that other dog is ill. Why would you let your dog run over and say hi, right? So teaching them how to be in the presence of other dogs and still paying attention to people around them and still holding the brain together as best they can. So number 9. Number 9 is reaction to distractions. And I believe the AKC website that's not in my notes, but I believe the AKC website had something like, somebody drops a pan or something, a lid, something that makes some metallic bang noise, right? But reaction to distractions, oh my God. In the animal setting, in the veterinary setting, in the grooming setting is things like loud phones, because if you work in a loud environment, you have the phone ringer up high. Doorbells. Sometimes there's a doorbell thing going on where, if we're in the back and we need to hear, somebody shows up. Dryers are loud. Shop vacs are loud. Some of our equipment can be loud. So I want you to be thinking that the distraction level for sound alone is something that we need to know how they're going to react. And we need to be teaching them to react well to that. Now, number 10 is made for grooming and vet visits. Supervised separation, being left in another person's care. And that one is actually meant for teaching dogs to be like prepping them for grooming and vet visits, right? So being left in another person's care, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, we think about, they're going to be passed off to somebody. They're going to be passed off to, even if your vet usually lets you stay for everything, it's very likely you're going to pass your dog to a tech and be on the other side of the room for something, right? I know I'm using lots of something. But so in the first part, we talked about kind of treating it like it's a dog sport. And then on the second part, I pulled out some of the actual dog sport because Canine Good Citizen Test actually does help prepare them for everything we need them to be doing. And the average dog in the average home should be able to do it. Yeah, we should be thinking in terms of, yep, that is easy peasy. That the average dog is going to be able to get that. There are lots of ways to get to it. There are lots of ways to work on it, but it's a great foundation. So, like I said, this was a little bit about trainers being thrown under the bus. Because if we want dogs to be trained to be good for this stuff, we need to tell trainers what we're expecting. And trainers, I want you to be thinking that the stuff that you're doing is awesome, but we need to add more. We need to add more skill sets. We need to add more ways of doing things, which is why I'm doing the podcast. Man, I want us all to be thinking about it. I want a new think tank because the couple of skills that we have aren't vast enough to help most dogs. They help in little ways, and those are awesome. But every dog is an individual, and we have a variety of situations that they have to be trained for to a level that I think some of us weren't aware of, right? To the level of just being able to be on a table, kind of check out, let people move us around, and touch us with loud things and soft things and things that buzz and spray us with sprayers and, things also like misting them down with coat conditioner. Anybody who uses a spray bottle for punishment is kind of setting their dog up to think coat conditioner might be a punishment too. So there are lots of things to think about. And I really want to inspire people to learn more about the skill sets that get us there. So I know it was a lot of information, but everybody have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me through my grooming and training business, happycrittersdogtraining.com, my email, chrissy@happycritters.net, and through the Creating Great Grooming Dogs Facebook page. And we have these awesome devices in our pockets that allow us to do live video with each other. I can help you with the dog on your table. We can set up live lessons, and you may be surprised at how much we can get accomplished together via video. I'm also happy to come to you if you're near my area in southern New Hampshire. If you're ready to go beyond the podcast, and I hope you do, I've made it really easy for you. If you go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step, you'll see all of the options. There's the Scholar Lounge community, there's the Modern Grooming Professional Certification, there's Master Canine Stylist and Professional Canine Stylist Diploma testings, there's the Behavior Lab for coaching and private one-on-one sessions with me, and of course, the Master Groomer Behavior Specialist program. So go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step.